Get everything out of the way.
Okay, if I can have your attention again.
Oh, are you? So you can see a little better?
Your attention, please.
Attention on deck.
Tonight we have Peter, KE7 RDM. He is the Assistant Volunteer Curator of the Hazard Project. And he's heavily involved with restoring the Hazard and the Hazard's radio room. As you remember, the club gave the money for the radio, the TBS radio transmitter, and he'll talk about how they're preparing to install that. So, welcome, Peter.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Thanks for having me back. It's a pleasure to come and be able to talk to you a little bit about the U.S.S. Hazard and what the undertakings are at Freedom Park right now. It's a really exciting time for us at the park. We're making a lot of great progress, and it's a pleasure to come show you. But before we talk about the park too much, I'll take you through the story of the park a little bit in the beginning, and then we'll get into more radio-specific stuff towards the end of the project. Or excuse me, towards the end of the presentation. We start today, it's going to be pretty heavily photographic based. I'll be kind of just talking here. If you have any questions along the way, yell them out. I'd be happy to answer them if I can.
Turn it this way just a little bit. You can rotate it. There you go. That's good.
Okay. Start with the first photograph. This is one of the original World War II photographs taken in November of '44 of Hazard's sister ship. Funny story, the Hazard was actually in such a hurry to leave in the end of October that she left before taking a picture. The captain had a letter and just put it in a filing cabinet and forgot about it. So they took a picture of her sister ship and doctored the numbers on the bow. The Navy did. So same paint scheme, same shipyard, all that good stuff. So we'll start off this evening with a few facts about the Hazard. The Hazard was laid down on the 20th of February 1944 by Winslow Marine Railway Company. Winslow Marine Railway Company ceased to exist in the early 50s. It's now an apartment complex in Winslow, Washington. She was launched, excuse me. She was launched on the 21st of May in 1944, but was not commissioned until the 31st of October of 1944. That's really rare for World War II because during the Second World War, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the story of the Liberty ships, we were putting them out every few weeks. The Hazard was put together in a more old-fashioned sense where every beam was welded on the same keel. Their big sections were not welded together. Each part was individually welded on. She displaces 945 tons in a combat load. As of today, we have our armament off and empty fuel tanks and empty storage tanks. She only drafts about 700 tons. Still a little too heavy to pick up and move. She's 184 feet, 6 inches long. And she has a beam of 33 feet. And she drafts 9 foot 9 inches on a combat load. Right now she sits at about 8.5 feet. And on what they would call flank speed, which is full speed ahead, she would do 14.8 knots through the water. She had a complement of 104 people on board, of which 8 were officers. And she was not very heavily armed, but for a minesweeper, many people would think that's still pretty heavy. She carries one 3-inch 50 caliber gun on the bow. That's still visible to this day. She has 2 40mm automatic Bofors mounts. An example of the rounds these things would fire. I've got a quick load of the 40mm rounds back on the back table if anyone had to see them. They're fully automatic. They were designed to take down small aircraft. She was actually credited with destroying 2 Japanese aircraft with those very guns. She carried 6 single 20mm mounts, 2 depth charge projectors, K-guns. I have a book about that back there as well. K-guns are what would shoot the depth charges over the side. And then she would have 2 depth charge racks to roll depth charges off the stern like we see in the movies. In addition to what I've got listed up there, she would also carry a Hedgehog projector on the bow as anti-submarine warfare as well. Now some people would ask, why would a minesweeper have anti-submarine warfare capabilities? Well, you got to remember in 1943 and 1944, quite frankly, the Germans were kicking our butts on the eastern seaboard. We couldn't get ships out fast enough, so anything capable of destroying a submarine was welcome.
When you say hedgehog, what is that?
A hedgehog is a small projectile that launches off like a rocket, and it does not explode until it actually makes contact with something floating in the ocean. And you got to remember, during the Second World War, the best way to fight submarines was with sound, same as it is today. The technology back then, however, was much worse. You don't have nice visual displays like you do now on board subs. So anytime you rolled depth charge off, your sonar man had to take his headphones off to keep from destroying his hearing. That means if you're tracking a submarine, you have to follow him, sail over him, and then roll a depth charge off the back. That leaves two problems. One, as soon as you have to take your headphones off, you lose sonar contact with him. In addition to that, he's now behind you. Not great. They realized quickly that there was better ways to do that. A hedgehog you can launch it off the bow. The submarine is in front of you. Start number one, that's good. Number two is it will not explode unless it makes contact with the submarine. So the only way, you will always have positive confirmation that you hit something. So this is a nice book, but I'll just give you a brief history. After she was rolled out in 44, she hit the ocean. She quickly got underway from San Francisco, her home base. I know the club has an example of an envelope I've sent to the club for having me last time with the original letterhead that all says San Francisco on it. She made a convoy mission on her way to Pearl Harbor before heading off to Eniwetok and serving off the coast of Okinawa as part of the invasion, doing submarine patrols and minesweeping patrols. She served all the way till the end of the war on board, and then up through 46. Now imagine being on board a ship, sitting there all the time, war comes to an end, you're going, yeah, I get to go home, right? Wrong. Mines are, much like today, didn't know any dates back then either. As soon as the war ended, the mines don't disappear. They still had to clear the seaways. It's really interesting to read the quartermaster's logs, which we still have back there. On the end of the Second World War, you go back and read, it's kind of a funny edition. It's like, well, war's over, we're still here. And then some expletives, kind of comical for an official government document. In 1971, after spending a number of years in Orange, Texas, she was purchased by a group of private Omaha businessmen and brought to Omaha via the Missouri River. She stayed that way for many years in private hands. Here's a number of photographs of the Hazard being picked up in Orange, Texas, and preparing her for her move to Omaha. This first picture in the upper left-hand corner is when they first picked her. You can see she sat there for a number of years, rather rusted and in not great shape. One thing that's very unique about the Hazard, however, is that in 1971, when she was acquired, she had never been recommissioned following the end of World War II. She had only served 2 years between 44 and 46 by the time she was decommissioned, and was never modified in any way, shape, or form. We have all the original documentation, like what you see back there, which is in a way makes her the most complete, historically accurate warship as a museum in the world today. There are only a few other museum ships in the world that are as unmodified and have as many documents as we have relating to her original service. You'll notice these bottom pictures as they were pushing her up the river. The gentleman here on the lower left is actually the main commanding officer who served the longest time aboard Hazard, C.B. Tibbles. In that picture, he's about 40. At the time he was commanding, he was 26 years old. To give you an idea, in terms of 107 men, they'd all be reporting to somebody my age. Rather shocking. She served wonderfully as a museum under private hands until '93 without any flaws. In 1993, those of you who have lived here a long time in Omaha may remember we had a flood. To that point, it was one of the worst floods they had had since the 50s. She weathered all the events and only came up with a slight list about 4 degrees to port. That was due to the fact that they had the gantry left on the port fantail. You'll notice here, without too much length, a newspaper clipping here from the time, dated December 2nd of '73. That's Kiewit Corporation re-leveling her off. Unlike her sister ship, this is the U.S.S. inaugural. She was the only minesweeper like Hazard at the time. She was based in St. Louis, Missouri. In the middle of the night, she broke free from her moorings. Some say it was intentional as an insurance scam. We'll never know for sure. She flowed downriver, hitting a number of bridges along her way before they were able to tie her back up. Later in the evening, however, she sank where she was moored, capsizing, and never to be moved again. You see some pictures here. Lower left is what she looked like as a museum ship. Upper right is when she was first acquired. And this bottom right photograph is what she looks like as of a couple of months ago. This past year, the river finally dropped low enough that they started scrapping her. Thus why all the pieces from her starboard area up there are missing. It's pretty sad to see. I was actually fortunate enough when I was in St. Louis a few weeks ago on business to visit the inaugural, and she's even farther gone than this. Her entire pilot house area is just completely gone, and there's graffiti all over it. Freedom Park was rebuilt after the '93 flood and remained in good hands until the early 2000s. At that time, the company who privately owned her boarded her up, called it good, and moved on. There was some fights with the city of Omaha, and the city of Omaha acquired her in 2007. Shortly thereafter, she was allowed open to the public with a small group of fledgling volunteers and in certain special events. Look familiar? That is, what year was that? 08, maybe? That was the when your club came out and operated from the fantail of the ship. Until 2011. In 2011, the city of Omaha had one of the worst floods it's had. It's the second worst flood in recorded history. You can see here a number of photographs. Freedom Park was hastily prepared. Many folks from different aspects of the city of Omaha were brought together rather quickly in an effort to preserve the ship the best they could. A number of city officials were not really fond of saving the ship. They were more worried about preventing what happened at inaugural. As she flowed downriver, she busted a number of bridges. One of the key people, and actually the current director of Parks and Rec at the time, wanted to drill holes in her hull to prevent her from floating away, having her sink where she sat. Luckily, a couple other people were smart at the time, were there, able to prevent that from happening. This upper photo, you can see Brooke Bench, who is, at the time was the executive director. He's now the main director of Parks and Rec. He's been a real friend of us, as well as the gentleman to his right, Ray Zardina, who is since retired, really were pivotal in preserving the vessel. They mobilized forces from Offutt, including from the 55th Logistics Wing, and were really pivotal in helping us move a bunch of equipment out and securing the ship. This was done a number of ways, with K-bars, highway barricades, hawse lines, and all sorts of other things. This was pivotal because of what happens here. You can see all those lines along her port side. Those, in essence, kept her from floating downriver. The river got so high that she actually popped out of her hull and moved 9 feet stern to the starboard side and 12 feet on her bow, quite a large amount. As the river started to come down again, she hung up on the side of her hull underneath her starboard keel and started to tilt in. It's very lucky that the river moved so much silt, because had it not, she would have capsized into her existing hull. The sand, however, was very soft, which is why you see what we see today, which is that list. During the flood, we were able to get a number of visits, thankfully, with a number of federal agencies who were required to help coordinate and assist us. Here are a few photos of some of those visits. The U.S. Coast Guard and FEMA took us out a couple of times. As I said, during my introduction, I'm one of the assistant volunteers. This is the other gentleman we co-curate the vessel. That's Dwayne Gallagher, visiting with U.S. Coast Guard. During that time, we were able to pump out rainwater and just preserve and move lines and keep her from floating around. Does anyone here own a boat? So you know, what does boat stand for? Bust out another 1,000, and the happiest day is the day you buy it, and the happiest day is the day you sell it. A lot of that is due to all the maintenance required. Well, you have a big steel ship, it's even more maintenance, and even more paint. It requires a lot of work and a lot of preservation. So these visits were pivotal. You can see here just a sense of the destruction as we went along, and this air shot shows just how much it looked like she was back at sea. It was really incredible. And it was very, very tragic to go along and see the real aspects of humility people had. Like this, I believe just the house past this one had a sign up on the porch that said, "Thanks, Army Corps, we're gone forever." And it was really, really tragic. A ton of people's lives were destroyed. On July 2nd, 2011, the river hit its second highest point in recorded history at 36.29 feet. At 38 feet, an evacuation order is issued for downtown Omaha. At 40 feet, the federal levee tops over. This became very close to reality. There were a lot of people in the emergency management agency who were really getting quite nervous and pulling their hair out. If anyone saw that map I showed before. In downtown Omaha, from 36th Street all the way to the river would have been completely flooded, and Epley Airfield would have been completely inundated. If anyone here has ever flown before, they know that anytime you have an airport runway that floods. Did anyone see pictures of I-80 when it flooded? You do that to a runway, it's going to take even longer. A highway has got this much concrete on it. A runway for Epley has this much. You're going to be down for months, if not a year.
2 feet of water.
When we were finally allowed back in the early October, this is the site we came to. Just senseless destruction. It looked more like a beach than any sort of park in the Midwest. You can just see the vast amounts of destruction. In some places, we had as high as 6 feet of silt throughout the park, all of which had to be moved.
That's terrible.
As part of the preparation, one of the things we had to do was remove the mast. The mast fared better than we thought. However, a number of logs had hit it and a bunch of paint had come off. It was really a lot of destruction. I can't emphasize that enough. In addition, because we were only able to visit ever so frequently because of the amount of coordination and paperwork involved, rainwater was able to seep in. That list allowed us to discover, I should say, a number of weak points that we had not known previously existed, where water could seep in. And so a number of places in the ship, such as this, which is the ship store back aft, had inches. In one place, we almost had a foot of rainwater pooled up in one of the corners, which just ate at the deck for months. And come October, when we were finally allowed in, a real worry at that point was that it would turn to ice. Water within a steel box turning to ice is actually enough to bend and break things. This is our galley, more rainwater you can see in the corner. And at this point, you've got to realize we had no electric lights either. As part of the preparation, all the electric lines had been pulled by OPPD. So it was a pitch black. When you think your house is dark at night, this is more like being in a cave. There is no light that permeates in. Rainwater was the least of our problems, however. In some areas, such as this, which is the sonar transducer room, right along the keel. Actually, you can see part of the keel right along here, lowest part of the ship near the bow. Floodwater had seeped in. Well, if anyone knows, we were pumping in millions of pounds of raw sewage into the Missouri River. Floodwater is not something you wanted to get anywhere close to. The sonar transducers had been blanked back in Orange, Texas in the 70s. However, after a number of years sitting underground, those seals had formed cracks and water was able to seep in. You can see I'm here standing in the bottom. I can almost stand up in that compartment, and that shows just where the flood line is, maybe 5 or 6 inches below the top of the compartment, but we were very, very lucky. And our clinometer in the pilot house shows at the end we were left with a 7.5 degree list. In 2012, we were able to really start good restoration projects. And as the projects rolled on, we started to see more and more progress. This was taken 2 weeks ago. This is the same ship store I showed in a few pictures ago. You can see just how much progress has been had. One of the other things we were able to do, since we're able to be closed this long, which is in a way a godsend because we've been able to accomplish a lot of projects we otherwise would not be. One such area is the pilot house. If anyone's ever been to the ship, they know the pilot house is one of the real big areas that draw your eye. It's beautiful, there's a lot of brass, lots of buttons, big wheel, you can see the river flowing by. It's a really peaceful and serene area. A place we can't dare close down when we're open for regular business. This flood allowed us to put a number of bags over things and spend weeks painting and really detailing everything, down to polishing brass with some of our volunteers from Offutt Air Force Base. And the finished product. As part of this, we were also able to replace the old wheel stand that was an add-on back in Orange, Texas, not original, with an exact copy from one of her sister ships, the inaugural, which we saw before. So the room has never been more original or complete. Now, I've shown a number of pictures. We all know most of you aren't really interested in that. what you want to see is the radio room. The radio room has been one of my big focal points as a ham operator myself, and is what originally brought me to the ship in the beginning. And as a college student, last time you saw me, it's really hard to throw an HF antenna out of a 4 or 5-story college dorm room. It's generally frowned upon. So I came here to try and, especially when they drill the windows shut and bolt them shut so no one jumps out. It was. Apparently someone tried it, so I guess ruins the fun for everyone else. So this is the radio room when we began the project. The first thing we did right before the flood was remove all the equipment. This is one of the last things I did before we found out we were no longer allowed to go. TBS, the TBS would have been housed on this desk in our foreground. It was never there since I had been going down and was removed originally during mothballs. The RAK and the RAL receivers would have been in the desk there in the aft ground with those big holes bolted in. Those had been removed. This was what the radio room really looked like prior to any formal startup, after all the equipment had been removed. This here is the receiver box. This is the patch box that allows you to take any receiver and put it pretty much anywhere in the ship. So the first step was to go through and bag up all the equipment that we could not move, even though we may have wanted to, like the 900-pound TBS Coke machine-sized radio. Then we painted and started putting in linoleum. We bought a bunch of fresh linoleum from a gentleman who stockpiled the stuff from the 80s and 70s and had it custom shipped and cut to us. And desks painted. And in this picture, I really like it because you can see the brass is starting to shine up and the new paint on the wall. Notice, however, a little bit of overspray on the deck. We weren't real proud of that one, but so be it. And then after the deck was painted, one of our things I did was bring down my ham radio. And as you can see, if those of you who are perusing back aft, anytime you make a call from a warship or even a museum warship, you start building a pile-up. Which, if you've never worked a pile-up as the guy everyone's trying to contact, it's a lot of fun. Some other areas as the radio room has been restored. And if anyone saw those old boxes, the patch panel, this one looked just like it with restored labels, new panels, and things have really started to come together. The TBL7 has been gone through. We're still missing a few parts, but that's okay. We need to get a couple of vacuum tubes and a way to do the final antenna tuning circuits that were removed during mothballs. But the motor generators all work. Nice big picture. It's hard to believe. So this radio, which was the main transmitter in HF and IF, would only put out 200 watts on CW. That was its maximum power. This operates on a motor generator, which is about as long as this table and weighs about 1,000 pounds. It's the only way you can power it. Back in the motor generator room, you can see the patch panel. This has since been repainted. And a nice close-up of the radio. So how do we do this? We do this with a lot of help. We've recently formed a nice partnership with a naval recruiting station here in Omaha, which has been turning out between 10 and 15 volunteers every weekend for us, who are capable young folks. And with that help, we've been able to repaint areas we've never been able to get to, and I've been able to work on the radio room more often since it's not just me and somebody else. A lot of progress has been made. So what's up next? In the next few steps, what we're going to be doing is, as you saw, the radio room is getting close. I was not able to snap a picture this evening. I tried to, but my camera was dead. The 2 receivers have been installed, RAK and the RAL receivers in the radio room. They are operational. I took a piece of wire and threw it out the porthole and lit it up, and we were able to receive on both. So that's very exciting for us. They've since been repainted, restored. We have a few short circuits in them in the variable capacitors, but we think we've got those worked out. The other thing we're getting ready to do is install the TBS that you were all generous enough to have your club donate. That is currently sitting at 24th Street Maintenance Office. We will be bringing that on in the next month or so when they come to put the gangway back on the ship. In the immediate future, one of our biggest news and our biggest hurdles has been getting the ship straightened. I know a couple of you, like Mary, you've been down since the ship has been at a list. That's been, I hate to say it, I don't even notice it anymore, but for a lot of our guests who come, they feel like they're getting ready to fall off. 7 degrees to the port side is kind of hard. You start feeling like you're walking like this. So starting next week, we have a truck coming to pump out any rainwater and engine oil that has since pooled up in the engine rooms. That's our first step. Once that's done, a contract will be written by the city for $100,000 with the help of FEMA to right the ship completely to a 0-degree list. That will be done by Anderson Excavation. We're hoping work starts in 2 weeks. Equipment will be brought in late this week. So maybe even today. I was not there today, but we suspect they'll do it tomorrow or Monday. Once that's done, we expect to hook the power back up, which has been hooked up for about a year. We'll have to remove it and straighten it up. At that point, when they go to put the gantry back on, the TBS will be lifted on below one level. The pallet itself weighs about 800 pounds. It comes with everything. It came with the receiver, the transmitter, all the tubes, and the motor generator set. So we can't lift that ourselves. That will be brought in. At that point, that will be installed and tested and be fully operational. I've been in contact with the Indianapolis Amateur Radio Club based at the Indianapolis War Memorial. They have a fully functioning TBS tuned up for 6 meters. We hope to make the same modifications to be able to start having 6-meter contacts in AM with the original piece of equipment. The other thing we'd like to do is get another modern HF rig and start having people operate from our radio room whenever we're open. Our goal is to be open by Memorial Day. Some of the other things in the process of doing that will have to be done prior to that is we hope once the ship is ready, we'll be doing some major painting of the ship. Any of you have seen pictures recently on our Facebook page. The outside has been in desperate need of a fresh coat of paint for about the last 4 years. That'll be one of our big pivotal steps we'll need to undertake. And just general upcare and maintenance. We still have a little bit of flood damage. We've been battling with problems like copper thieves and things like that. We've overcome a lot of those problems, but it's a constant struggle. And so progress is being made, as you can see in many of those pictures. I would encourage anyone here to go and check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/freedompark. We have a number of photos and we continue to update that at least. We try to update it once a week. It doesn't always happen, but we do as often as we can. And we will be making announcements there on when we will open and when volunteer opportunities arise. If anyone is interested in coming and taking a tour of the park prior to our main opening, we try to accommodate those as best we can. You can send us a message through that park. You can come talk to me afterwards if you're interested as well. At this point, I'd like to open it up for any questions. Yes, sir.
Originally, the ship was in one position and it moved. Will it be put back in the exact same position?
It will not. At 700 tons, the ground is so soft, we have no way of accurately moving it safely. What they're going to do is Anderson Excavation is going to trench along the starboard side because she has that port list, and then they're going to create pillars of sand to help support that weight, and then slowly blast that away with a hydraulic mining process, which should allow them to have nice control to lower the starboard side down gradually over the course of a week or two. We feel that's the safest way to move the vessel, as well as the most efficient way, given our cost constraints.
How far is it removed from the original position?
I said it's about 12 feet at our stern side and bow side. So enough where that list is a real risk into the hull, and that's why we do have that list. Her keel still sits in her original hull, although only by a foot or two.
One thing I didn't hear is, well, what was the engines that were in there?
She had 2 Cooper Bessemer GB8 locomotive engines. Each one drove its own reduction gear. She was a 2-screwed vessel. Her forward engine room, which was just off the galley area, provides power to her port shaft, and her starboard engine or rear engine room provides it to her starboard shaft. In each of those engine rooms, there were a number of generators to provide DC current for her DC minesweeping gear. As I said, she was capable of electric mine warfare as well, which was to say magnetic, and she had needed that DC current to provide her degaussing equipment. In addition to that, they had the 2 AC generators to provide power for lighting, 120 volt.
What voltage does the CW transmitter take?
The CW transmitter
24
takes
volts or something?
It takes a strange voltage, and I don't remember off the top of my head, and that's why it uses a motor generator set. 440 volts, which is what the ship is based on, powers into the original motor, which spins 3 subsequent motors, which provide the voltage for the plate and for the carrier, and then one other is for the heater circuit.
How'd the little submarine fare with the flood?
The submarine fared far better. The submarine, the water came up about a foot under the door. However, she was not shifted at all. She was a little more watertight. There is work to get her cleaned up. We have less volunteers for the sub. The other issue is the way the submarine is wired. The city of Omaha will not at this time issue a permit to rerun electric lines to her. Consequently, we have a number of temporary emergency pot lighting, just little service lamps strategically placed around the sub, and we run an extension cord to the ship. The submarine originally ran off batteries, which are DC current, as you know. There's no way to transform that 240 AC down to DC, so the equipment that was there running AC current was, at the time, built in the 70s, not to code to begin with in the 70s, and is definitely not to code now. And so the city of Omaha doesn't feel they can issue a permit. But other than that, she looks great. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is there any servicemen still alive that might have,
There are. I believe at this time we know of 3. The majority of them have unfortunately passed. Many of them passed in the early 2000s. I believe the last reunion was in '98, but I have to double check on that.
so that reunion would have been up here in Omaha?
I believe so. I'd have to double check, though. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't want to give you any false information. One of our more active survivors was very young at the time. His name is Barry, Mr. Barry, and there's actually photos of him on the Facebook page during his last visit before the flood. We're starting to build great relationships with a lot of those servicemen's families, however. We've been in contact with a number of them, providing records to them. We have all the original personnel records with critical information redacted, as well as a lot of them have come and donated artifacts as their parents have passed and a number of years have passed and they're ready to make that disconnect. They've been generous enough to donate a lot of the artifacts. Yes, sir.
Do you know how much horsepower those locomotive engines have?
I'd have to double check. I think it was something in the tune of 1,200 horsepower apiece, but I need to go back and look.
1,710.
Each?
500 off, sorry. Yeah.
That was each, right? Okay.
Do you have any HF ham antennas on the ship?
We do. We have one. It's an old Cushcraft that was left, and it's in rather sorry shape. I can't get the connection off. It's been sealed as one. It was there originally from the 80s. It works pretty well, though. As you can see with the cards as evidence in back, we get pretty good signal reports out of it. One of the plans, however, is off the original cupola system to run a 207-foot end-fed long wire with the ship hull as a counterpoise. We found that through our antenna simulation that should give us a nice SWR on pretty much all the ham bands that we can run either out of the TS-930 there or out of, hopefully, the TBL-7 eventually, with low SWR, with the tuner, of course. Anything else? I want to say thank you for coming and hearing me out on this. If you have any questions, I'll be around afterwards. You'll notice in the back I brought a number of artifacts. Feel free to look through them. 2 of them are quartermaster's logbooks, so that's the original first-hand account. Doesn't get much more first-hand than that. As well as a few radio man second class and third class test books of the time, and see if you can actually pass the Navy test of the time. And 40 millimeter shells that would have been shot out of the Vopers, as well as a 40 millimeter book. And if no one has any other questions, I'll be around afterwards. Feel free to come up and ask me anything. Thank you so much.